Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Raven's Readings. I'm reading from The Sign of the Four, written by Arthur Conan Doyle in 1890. This novel features his character Sherlock Holmes, a detective who excels in observation, deduction, logic, and forensics. Assisting Holmes is Dr. John Watson, a former Army surgeon. The novel is told from Watson's point of view. I do readings twice a week. If you subscribe to my Substack newsletter, you'll get notified of my updates as soon as they're ready. If you enjoyed this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. I'm considering next doing The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Last time we left Dr. Watson with Lucy Marsden as they opened the treasure chest and discovered it was empty. What happened to the treasure, and how did Small acquire it in the first place? Watson and the police inspector will now rejoin Holmes, Detective Jones, and the criminal, Jonathan Small. This is a long final chapter, so I'll do it in 2 readings. Chapter 12, Part 1, The Strange Story of Jonathan Small. A very patient man was that inspector in the cab, for it was a weary time before I rejoined him. His face clouded over when I showed him the empty box. "There goes the reward," he said gloomily. "Where there's no money, there's no pay. This night's work would have been worth a tenner each to Sam Brown and me if the treasure had been there. It's a bad job," he said. "So Mr. Athelney Jones will think." His forecast proved to be correct, for the detective looked blank enough when I got to Baker Street and showed him the empty box. My companion lounged in his armchair with his usual listless expression, while Small sat stolidly opposite to him with his wooden leg cocked over his sound one. As I exhibited the empty box, Small leaned back in his chair and laughed aloud. "This is your doing, Small," said Athelney Jones angrily. "Yes, I have put it away. You shall never lay hand upon it," he cried exultantly. "It's my treasure, and if I can't have the loot, I'll take darn good care that no one else does. I tell you that no living man has any right to it, unless it is 3 men who are in the Adamant convict barracks and myself. Well, I know they would have had me do just what I have done and throw the treasure into the Thames rather than let it go to kith or kin of Sholto or Marsden. It was not to make them rich that we did for Achmet. You'll find the treasure where the key is and where little Tonga is." "You are deceiving us, Small," said Athelney Jones sternly. "If you'd wished to throw the treasure into the Thames, it would have been easier for you to throw box and all." "Well, easier for me to throw and easier for you to recover," he answered with a shrewd sidelong look. "The man that was clever enough to hunt me down is clever enough to pick an iron box from the bottom of a river. It went to my heart to do it, though. I was half mad when you came up with this. However, there's no good grieving over it. I've had ups in my life and I've had downs, but I've learned not to cry over spilt milk." "This is a very serious matter, Small," said the detective. "If you had helped justice instead of thwarting it in this way, you would have had a better chance at your trial." "Justice," snarled the ex-convict. "A pretty justice. Whose loot is this, if not ours? Where's the justice that I should give it up to those who have never earned it? Look how I earned it. 20 long years in that fever-ridden swamp, all day at work under the mango tree, all night chained up in the filthy convict huts, bitten by mosquitoes, racked by ague, bullied by every cursed black-faced policeman who loved to take it out of a white man. That was how I earned the Agar treasure. And you talk to me of justice, because I cannot bear to feel that I have paid this price only that another may enjoy it. I would rather swing a score at times or have one of Tonga's darts in my hide than live in a convict cell and feel that another man is at his ease in a palace with the money that should be mine." Small had dropped his mask of stoicism, and all this came out in a wild whirl of words while his eyes blazed and the handcuffs clanked together with the impassioned movement of his hands. I could understand, as I saw the fury and the passion of the man, that it was no groundless or unnatural terror which had possessed Major Sholto when he first learned that the injured convict was on his track. "You forget that we know nothing of all this," said Holmes quietly. We have not heard your story, and we cannot tell how far justice may originally have been on your side. Well, sir, you have been very fair-spoken to me, though I can see that I have you to thank that I have these bracelets upon my wrists. Still, I bear no grudge for that. It's all fair and above board. If you want to hear my story, I have no wish to hold it back. What I say to you is God's truth, every word of it. Thank you. You can put the glass beside me here, and I'll put my lips to it if I'm dry. I'm a Worcester man myself, born near Pershore. I was always a bit of a rover. At last, however, when I was about 18, I got into a mess over a girl and could only get out of it again by taking the Queen's shilling and joining the 3rd Buffs, which was just starting for India. I wasn't destined to do much soldiering, however, and I just learned to handle my musket when I was fool enough to go swimming in the Ganges. A crocodile took me, just as I was halfway across, and nipped off my right leg as clean as a surgeon could have done it, just above the knee. What with the shock and the loss of blood, I fainted and should have drowned if the company soldier Holder hadn't caught hold of me and paddled for the bank. I was 5 months in hospital over it, and when at last I was able to limp out of it with this timber toe strapped to my stump, I found myself invalided out of the army and unfitted for any active occupation. A man named Abel White, who had come out there as an indigo planter, wanted an overseer to look after his coolies and keep them up to their work. The colonel recommended me strongly for the post, and as the work was mostly to be done on horseback, my leg was no great obstacle. What I had to do was to ride over the plantation, keep an eye on the men as they worked, and report the idlers. The pay was fair, I had comfortable quarters, and altogether I was content to spend the remainder of my life in indigo planting. Well, I was never in luck's way long. Suddenly, without a note of warning, the great mutiny broke upon us. 1 month India lay as peaceful and still to all appearances as Surrey or Kent, and the next there were 200,000 black devils let loose, and the country was a perfect hell. Our plantation was at a place called Muttra, near the border of the northwest provinces. Night after night, the whole sky was alight with the burning bungalows, and day after day we had small companies of Europeans passing through our estate with their wives and children on their way to Agra, where were the nearest troops. Mr. Abel White had it in his head that the affair had been exaggerated, and it would blow over as suddenly as it had sprung up. Of course, we stuck by him, I and Dawson, who, with his wife, used to do the book work and the managing. Well, one fine day the crash came. I'd been away on a distant plantation and was riding slowly home in the evening when my eye fell upon something all huddled together at the bottom of a steep nullah. I rode down to see what it was, and the cold struck through my heart when I found it was Dawson's wife, all cut into ribbons and half eaten by jackals and native dogs. A little further up the road, Dawson himself was lying on his face, quite dead, with an empty revolver in his hand and 4 sepoys lying across each other in front of him. When I saw a thick smoke curling up from Abel White's bungalow and the flames beginning to burst through the roof, I knew that I could do my employer no good, but only throw my own life away if I meddled in the matter. From where I stood, I could see hundreds of the black fiends with their red coats still on their backs, dancing and howling round the burning house. Some of them pointed at me, and a couple of bullets sang past my head, so I broke away across the paddy fields and found myself late at night safe within the walls at Agra. As it proved, however, there was no great safety there either. The whole country was up like a swarm of bees. It was a fight of the millions against the hundreds, and the cruelest part of it was these men that we fought against, foot, horse, and gunners, were our own picked troops, whom we had taught and trained, handling our own weapons and blowing our own bugle calls. At Agra, there were the 3rd Bengal Fusiliers and some Sikhs, and 2 troops of horse, and a battery of artillery. A volunteer corps of clerks and merchants had been formed, and this I joined, wooden leg and all. We went out to meet the rebels at Shangunj early in July, and we beat them back for a time, but our powder gave out, and we had to fall back upon the city. Our leader moved across the river and took up his position in the old fort at Agra. I don't know if any of you gentlemen ever read or heard anything of that old fort. A very queer place, the queerest that I ever was in, and I've been in some rum corners too. The old quarter, where nobody goes, is given over to the scorpions and the centipedes. Is all full of great deserted halls and winding passages and long corridors twisting in and out, so easy enough for folk to get lost in it. For this reason, it was seldom that anyone went into it, though now and again a party with torches might go exploring. The river washes along the front of the old fort, and so protects it, but on the sides and behind there are many doors, and these had to be guarded, of course, in the old quarter, as well as in that which was actually held by our troops. What we did was to organize a central guardhouse in the middle of the fort, and to leave each gate under the charge of one white man and 2 or 3 natives. I was selected to take charge during certain hours of the night with a small, isolated door upon the southwest side of the building. 2 Sikh troopers were placed under my command, and I was instructed, if anything went wrong, to fire my musket, when I might rely upon help coming at once from the central guard. Well, I was pretty proud at having this small command given me, since I was a raw recruit, and a game-legged one at that. For 2 nights I kept the watch with my Punjabis. They were tall, fierce-looking chaps, Mohammed Singh and Abdullah Khan by name, both old fighting men who had borne arms against us at Jallianwala. I used to stand outside the gateway, looking down on the broad, winding river and on the twinkling lights of the great city. The beating of drums, the rattle of tom-toms, the yells and the howls of the rebels, drunk on opium and with bang, were enough to remind us all night of our dangerous neighbors across the stream. Every 2 hours, the officer of the night used to come round to all the posts to make sure that all was well. The 3rd night of my watch was dark and dirty, with a small driving rain. It was dreary work standing in the gateway hour by hour in such weather. At 2 a.m, the rounds passed and broke for a moment the weariness of the night. After, I took out my pipe and laid down my musket to strike the match. In an instant, the 2 Sikhs were upon me. One of them snatched my firelock up and leveled it at my head, while the other held a great knife to my throat and swore between his teeth that he would plunge it into me if I moved a step. I opened my mouth with the intention of giving a scream, if it was my last one, which might at least alarm the main guard. The man who held me seemed to know my thoughts, for even as I braced myself, he whispered, "Don't make a noise. The fort is safe enough. There are no rebel dogs on this side of the river." There was a ring of truth in what he said, and I knew that if I raised my voice, I was a dead man. "Listen to me, Sahib," said the taller and fiercer of the pair, the one whom they called Abdullah Khan. "You must either be with us now, or you must be silenced forever. The thing is too great a one for us to hesitate. Either you are heart and soul with us on your oath on the cross of the Christians, or your body this night shall be thrown into the ditch, and we shall pass over to our brothers in the rebel army. There's no middle way. Which is it to be, death or life?" "How can I decide?" I said. "You have not told me what you want of me. But I tell you now that if it is anything against the safety of the fort, I will have no truck with it, so you can drive home your knife and welcome." "Oh, it is nothing against the fort," said he. "We only ask you to do that which your countrymen came to this land for. We ask you to be rich. If you will be one of us this night, we will swear to you upon the naked knife and by the 3-fold oath which no Sikh was ever known to break, that you shall have your fair share of the loot. A quarter of the treasure shall be yours. We can say no fairer." "But what is the treasure then?" I asked. I am as ready to be as rich as you can be, if you will but show me how it can be done." "You will swear then," said he, "by the bones of your father, by the honor of your mother, by the cross of your faith, to raise no hand and speak no word against us, either now or afterwards?" "I will swear it," I answered, "provided that the fort is not endangered." "All right, then my comrade and I will swear that you have a quarter of the treasure, which shall be equally divided among the 4 of us." "Oh, there are but 3, said I. No, Dost Akhtar must have his share. We can tell the tale to you while we await them. Do you stand at the gate, Mohammed Singh, and give notice of their coming." "The thing stands thus, Sahib. There's a Raja in the northern provinces who has much wealth, though his lands are small. Much has come to him from his father, and more still he has set by himself, for he is of low nature and hoards his gold rather than spend it. When the troubles broke out, he would be friends both with the lion and the tiger, with the sepoy and with the company's Raj. Soon, however, it seemed to him that the white man's day would come. Yet, being a careful man, he made such plans that, come what might, half at least of his treasure should be left to him. That which was in gold and silver he kept by him in the vaults of his palace, but the most precious stones and the choicest pearls that he had he put in an iron box, and sent it by his trusty servant, who, under the guise of a merchant, should take it to the fort at Agra, there to lie until the land is at peace. Thus, if the rebels won, he would have his money, but if the company conquered, his jewels would be saved to him. Having thus divided his hoard, he threw himself into the cause of the sepoys, since they were strong upon his borders. This pretended merchant, who travels under the name of Ahmed, is now in the city of Agra and desires to gain his way into the fort. He has with him as traveling companion my foster brother, Dost Akbar, who knows his secret. Dost Akbar has promised this night to lead him to a side gate of the fort, and has chosen this one for his purpose. Here he will come presently, and here he will find Mohammed Singh and myself waiting him. The place is lonely, and none shall know of his coming. The world shall know of the merchant Ahmed no more, but the great treasure of the Rajah shall be divided amongst us. What say you to it, Sahib? Well, in Worcester, Jonathan said, the life of a man seems a great and sacred thing. It was very different when there is fire and blood all around you, and you've been used to meeting death at every turn. Whether Ahmed the merchant lived or died was a thing as light as air to me, but at the talk about the treasure, my heart turned to it, and I thought of what I might do in the old country with it, and how my folk would stare when they saw their ne'er-do-well coming back with his pockets full of gold moidors. I had therefore already made up my mind. Abdullah Khan, however, think that I hesitated and pressed the matter more closely. Consider, Sahib, said he, that if this man is taken by the commandant, he will be hung or shot, and his jewels taken away by the government, so that no man will be a rupee the better for them. Now, since we do the taking of him, why should we not do the rest as well? The jewels will be as well with us as in the company's coffers. There'll be enough to make every one of us rich men and great chiefs. No one can know about the matter, for here we are cut off from all men. What could be better for the purpose? Say again, Sahib, whether you're with us or if we must look upon you as an enemy. I am with you heart and soul, said I. It is well, he answered, handing me back the firelock. You see that we trust you, for your word, like ours, is not to be broken. We now have only to wait for my brother and the merchant. Does your brother know, then, of what you will do? I asked. Yes, the plan was his. He has devised it. We will go to the gate and share the watch with Mohammed Singh. The rain was still falling steadily, for it was just the beginning of the wet season. Brown, heavy clouds were drifting across the sky, and it was hard to see more than a stone cast. A deep moat lay in front of our door, but the water was in places nearly dried up, and it could easily be crossed. Suddenly my eye caught the glint of a shaded lantern at the other side of the moat. It vanished among the mound heaps, and then appeared again, coming slowly in our direction. Here they are, I exclaimed. You will challenge him, Sahib, as usual, whispered Abdullah. Give him no cause for fear. Send us in with him, and we shall do the rest while you stay here on guard. Have the lantern ready to uncover, though we may be sure that it is indeed the man. The light had flickered onwards, now stopping and now advancing, until I could see two dark figures upon the other side of the moat. I let them scramble down the sloping bank, splash through the mire, and climb halfway up the gate before I challenged them. Who goes there? Said I in a subdued voice. Friends, came the answer. I uncovered my lantern and threw a flood of light upon them. The first was an enormous Sikh with a black beard which swept nearly down to his cummerbund. The other was a little fat round fellow with a great yellow turban and a bundle in his hand, done up in a shawl. He seemed to be all in a quiver of fear, for his hands twitched as if he had the ague, and his head kept turning to the left and right with two bright little twinkling eyes, like a mouse when he ventures out of his hole. When he saw my white face, he gave a little chirrup of joy and came running up towards me. "Your protection, Sahib," he panted. "Your protection for the unhappy merchant Ahmed. I have travelled across Rajputana that I might seek the shelter of the fort at Agra. I have been robbed and beaten and abused because I have been a friend of the company. It is a blessed night this, when I am once more in safety, I and my poor possessions." "What have you in the bundle?" I asked. "An iron box," he answered, "which contains one or two little family matters which are of no value to others, but which I should be sorry to lose. Yet I am not a beggar, and I shall reward you, young Sahib, and your governor also, if he will give me the shelter I ask." I could not trust myself to speak longer with the man. The more I looked at his fat, frightened face, the harder it seemed that we should slay him in cold blood. It was best to get it over. "Take him to the main guard," said I. The two Sikhs closed in upon him on each side, and the giant walked behind while they marched in through the dark gateway. Never was a man so compassed around with death. I remained at the gateway with the lantern. I could hear the measured tramp of their footsteps sounding through the lonely corridors, and suddenly it ceased, and I heard voices, a scuffle, the sounding of blows. A moment later there came to my horror a rush of footsteps coming in my direction, with the loud breathing of a running man. I turned my lantern down the long straight passage, and there was the fat man, running like the wind with a smear of blood across his face, and close at his heels, bounding like a tiger, the great black-bearded Sikh with a knife flashing in his hand. I've never seen a man run so fast as that little merchant. I could see that if he once passed me and got into the open air, he would save himself yet. I cast my firelock between his legs as he raced past, and he rolled twice over like a shot rabbit. Ere he could stagger to his feet, the Sikh was upon him and buried his knife twice in his side. The man never uttered moan nor moved muscle, but lay where he had fallen. Small stopped for a moment and held out his manacled hands for the whiskey and water which Holmes had brewed for him. For myself, I confess that I had now conceived the utmost horror of the man, not only for this cold-blooded business in which he had been concerned, but even more for the somewhat flippant and careless way in which he narrated it. Whatever punishment was in store for him, I felt that he might expect no sympathy from me. Sherlock Holmes and Jones sat with their hands upon their knees, deeply interested in the story, but with the same disgust written upon their faces. He may have observed it, for there was a touch of defiance in his voice and manner as he proceeded. "It was all very bad, no doubt," said Small, "but I should like to know how many fellows in my shoes would have refused a share of this loot when they knew that they'd have their throats cut for their pains. Besides, it was my life or his once he was in the fort. If he had got out, the whole business would come to light, and I should have been court-martialed and shot as likely as not, for people were not very lenient at a time like that." "Go on with your story," said Holmes shortly. "Well, we carried him in, Abdullah, Akbar, and I. A fine weight he was, too, for all that he was so short. We took him to a place which the Sikhs had already prepared. It was some distance off, where a winding passage leads to a great empty hall, the brick walls of which are all crumbling to pieces. The earth floor had sunk in at one place, making a natural grave, so we left Ahmed the merchant there, having first covered him over with loose bricks. This done, we all went back to the treasure. It lay where he had dropped it when he was first attacked. The box was the same which now lies open upon your table. A key was hung by a silken cord to that carved handle upon the top. We opened it, and the light of the lantern gleamed upon a collection of gems such I have read of and thought about when I was a little lad at Pershore. It was blinding to look upon them. When we had feasted our eyes, we took them all out and made a list of them. There were 143 diamonds of the first water. Then there were 97 very fine emeralds and 170 rubies, some of which, however, were small. There were 40 deep red almandines, 210 sapphires, 61 agates, and a great quantity of beryls, onyxes, cat's eyes, turquoises, and other stones, the very names of which I did not know at the time, though I've become more familiar with them since. Besides this, there were nearly 300 very fine pearls, 12 of which were set in a gold coronet. By the way, this last had been taken out of the chest, and It was not there when I recovered it. I'll pause my reading here about halfway through the chapter. They have the treasure, it seems, but how does the treasure chest get to England and to Holmes's study? What happened to all of Small's partners? Stay tuned for the next reading. If you enjoyed this reading or have other classics you'd like to hear, leave me a comment. Check out my other posts on my Substack at ravensview.substack.com. And remember to share this with your friends. Ta-ta for now.